once again. Thank you all for joining us. This is Nuance, and I am Mike Scala with a new background, which we will discuss. And I'm joined, as always, by Jay Carter, also known as Timid, the hip-hop artist and the chair of BLM Tokyo. What's going on, Jay?
I'm also with a different background, but not a new one. It's kind of one from before.
It's a throwback, but yours is also blurry, so we have to kind of guess what the Jay background is.
Yeah, well, I'm back in Japan after a long trip.
How was the journey? Arduous?
Huh?
How was the journey?
Arduous. I think arduous was probably part of it. Yeah. So I mean, my trip back generally takes about 24 hours.
24 hours. That doesn't even sound right? Like that sounds like old days on a Voyager or something.
Yeah, well, I have to go through, what's that? 1, 2, 3, 4 airports.
Which 4 airports?
Well, the airport in Virginia, then transfer in Atlanta to Tokyo, and then Tokyo to my city in Japan.
Okay.
So the bulk of the flight time really is the flight from Atlanta to Tokyo, which is about a 12, 13 hour flight. It's a direct shot. The rest, I'd say there's about 7, 8 hours worth of layover.
So they have direct flights from the east coast of the U.S. to Japan. No layovers in L.A. or anything?
Oh, yeah. You can go directly from like JFK to Tokyo.
That's pretty cool.
And it's only about a 12-hour flight.
That sounds better than 24 hours.
Yeah, well, like I said, the thing that takes longer is the layovers, right? So about 7 or 8 hours worth of layovers. So if I'm taking that 13 hours and you toss another 7, 8 on top of that, plus getting to the airport and whatnot. So, it just ends up with about 24 hours total.
So were you able to rest after your trip?
Yeah, actually, you know what? Jet lag hasn't been so bad so far. I arrived at I got back to my apartment probably, after 8, 9. So I was tired. I was able to go to sleep for the first night. So yeah, that seems all right. Now that I'm back, I've got to deal with this weight. That's what's what's going on. I put on 20 pounds since I was in Virginia.
Yeah, I was going to say those aren't pandemic pounds. Those are Virginia pounds. Those are U.S. pounds.
Yeah. Just since December, I put on 20 pounds. And a lot of it is in the stomach. So I've got work to do.
Yes, to borrow our tagline, we've got work.
Yeah,
that is certainly staying healthy physically is definitely critical. So you see the new background. I am actually at Lehman College in the Bronx. Shout out to Lehman College in CUNY. We are working with them. Hopefully going forward, we've been trying to work this out for a minute. We had intended to use their actual facilities here, meaning the cameras and the mic and everything. Tonight had some technical issues, so we're still working on that going forward. But physically, I am here, and hopefully this is a way for us to take this podcast to the next level. And really, as we said, it's an educational thing that we do here. So I think it's a good look for us to partner with the college like Lehman here at CUNY. And, hopefully it'll be a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, it looks really official.
Yeah, right? It looks official. And I'm in a suit because I am coming from a hearing, which we will talk about. I kind of want to vent on that because I think that, as the headline says, the New York ballot access process is way too archaic. There are certainly things to talk about. Reforms are needed still, even though some reforms were just made. We have a long way to go, right? There is work to do, as we say.
Right. Yeah. We should always be looking to find ways to improve and make things easier from all parties involved.
Yeah. What is this? It's like wallpaper or something. You see that behind me? I didn't even notice what that was.
Yeah, I wasn't focusing on that. I was looking at what looks like a stuffed animal on over your other shoulder.
No, there's a lamp, isn't it? That's a lamp.
Go down a little bit.
It's a stuffed animal.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at. Yeah.
Now this place is official. Hopefully we can make full use of the studio facilities in the future. It'll be very nice. And hopefully we can get some students here at CUNY on board as well to work with us. So
yeah, I think look.
I wanted to talk about, I guess it's a throwback to a conversation that we had a few months ago. Actually, it was the episode where I was wearing the Christmas hat. So I guess it was the end of December. We had Aaliyah Abraham, I believe, was the guest that week. And we were talking about doing what you love and how you often hear people say, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life, and how that can be unrealistic for a lot of people, depending on your circumstances. But I found recently, having turned 40 myself, that the older I get, the more I want to take control of my life and focus on doing things I like and finding ways to cut out things I don't. And I'm confident now to know what I'm good at, what I'm not good at, what I like, what I don't like, because I've got that experience behind my back. So it's not a matter of me trying to find myself anymore, as much as trying to focus my life in every which way on doing what I like. And it starts with the simple things, right? Like the kind of bread you like on a sandwich, right? Like I've lived long enough to know what I like and what I don't like. And I can say, I don't like this, I'm not going to eat this. You know, maybe when you're younger, it's like, oh, try something new. Like, you know what I mean? Like I've tried it a million times already. By now I know if I like it or not. So I try to take that approach to my career as well. And an example in my law practice, if there are certain things that I don't think I have time to do, I don't have the capacity to do, maybe I'm not the greatest at, or I just don't want to do, I'm trying to delegate that to other people now, you know, and I think that's a kind of a logical progression of the business, and it's never going to be perfect. And I know the example that came up last time was, well, like, let's say you love to cook and you open up a restaurant, you're not always going to be cooking, right? You can be dealing with business and problems and fixing the stove or whatever it is, personnel, you know, bills. But that's, I think, anything in life, right? I think it's unrealistic for anyone to be able to say every moment of your life is perfect, right? There are always going to be issues. It's like, you know, the analogy I have is a relationship. I mean, every relationship you're in is not going to be perfect. It takes work usually, but a lot of people think that the pros outweigh the cons, hopefully, right? And that's the calculation you have to make, but it's never going to be perfect. So I think that, you know, that same kind of approach should be used for one's career to the extent possible, knowing that, yes, everyone's circumstance is different. Everyone's situation is different. Maybe we're not where we want to be. Maybe we're aspiring to get to a better position. But I think that the goal should be maximizing those moments that do give us joy, that make us happy, and that we're good at, and we feel good, we get value from, and finding ways to minimize what we don't like, whether that's delegating it, hiring other people, staying out of certain fields. As a lawyer, I don't have to take every case either. Maybe as a new lawyer, there was pressure, like, oh, but you have to get your feet wet. You got to try these different things. Maybe you're good at this, maybe you're not. Just try it out. See, you know, see where I've done it long enough now where I know, or I'm, you know, and obviously we're always still learning and still growing. There are other areas to explore as well. But if it's something that I've done a few times and I don't want to do it, I don't have to keep doing that, right? And I think life is short enough where, you know, we should just try to gain the most value out of it, and you know, however that looks for us.
Right, and I think it does kind of you know, connect with that saying that you mentioned and we talked about before about, you know, if you find something that you love and do that, and you never work a day in your life. I think it's more about, if it's something that you really don't like or you're not good at, it becomes more of a chore, right? It becomes more stressful. Whether you can do it or not, it just becomes more stressful. And if you focus on things that either you know you're better at, you're good at, you don't mind doing, that you can sit for hours with it, then it's less like work than it is something that you're forced to do.
Right. Yeah, and like when it comes to law, it's tough juggling a lot of different things, right? Obviously, I'm involved in law and politics and other things, and that becomes tough to manage your time in the most efficient way. So I really like the high level activities, right? Like framing the argument, thinking, okay, this is the case that we're taking on. This is what our position is. This is what our overall argument is. This is how we're going to approach it. But then when it comes to the minutia, I don't need to be the one sitting down for 12 hours writing all that out or doing all the legal research. Now, a lot of people use AI for things like that, but you know, you could also have other lawyers or paralegals, assistants, whatever it is, right? I mean, if it's not something that you think your time is best spent doing, there's nothing wrong with giving it to other people, as long as you can trust that they're going to do as good of a job as you would.
Right, and you can also go over and review that work to make sure it's, absolutely, you know. Yeah, and it was the same for me in teaching, right? I prefer teaching older people, at least, maybe high school or above or college or above, because I like to challenge in the discourse that goes on. I like more debates and discussions like this versus teaching the basics to children who may not be interested right now. Their mind may be somewhere else. And I'm talking really little kids who prefer more to play than to actually sit down and learn. I like to have this type of banter with it. I like to challenge the students. I want to make them challenge their opinions and their ideas. And so I prefer that type of teaching to the other stuff. So I know going in, and I remember at one of the schools I was working at, I told my manager, I was like, I just prefer not to do this over here.
Right.
I can do it. It just
Yeah. And a lot of it, I feel like, going back to the law thing, is young lawyers game. Like, I've done it. It's like been there, done that. I've written a ton of motions. Do I need to do this again? Maybe, but maybe a lot of those details are best left for younger, hungry lawyers who want to sit there and do that. Where I've got that feeling of, I've done this already. My time could be spent doing something else at a higher level right now. But there are other people who are trying to get their feet wet, trying to get that experience, and don't mind doing that. And that's great. I think we all kind of play that position, and we should be secure in ourselves enough to know what we want to do, what we don't want to do, what we can do, what we can't do, what our limitations are, right? All of that. And I think that's the best. And again, it's never going to be perfect, but I think it's about maximizing those positive experiences, because I am happy. And I look at this, and I look at other people who say that they're not happy. They don't have fulfillment in their life. I'm trying to figure out what the disconnect is. I mean, obviously, I've been very fortunate and blessed and privileged in many ways, but I also try to position myself in ways that make me happy. That I'm just doing what I want to do, because I don't feel like I'm living a life that I don't want to live. Right? I do things that I like doing, and my interests are varied. And that's something else that I want to get into. I was having a conversation with someone recently about music and how I'm taking a serious approach to it, as I always have. And they were saying, wow, it sounds like you're really approaching it as a career, whereas they do music more as a hobby. But I wasn't even looking at it like that. I was looking at everything I do is part of my career. It's part of my brand, if you wish. It might sound a little pretentious, but I feel like that's kind of how you create value for yourself in any business, in industry in general, right? You're trying to create like a unique lane for yourself where you can be marketable in a way that other people aren't. You're trying to stand out from the crowd. And so I don't look at it like law is my only business, or it's politics, or it's music. Everything I do is part of my business because it increases my value in the marketplace. And I think, for example, having a successful record helps my law career as well. Like, these things aren't happening in a vacuum. I think they're all interconnected.
Yeah, and I think I've thought about that before too. I think everything, like as far as myself and both of us, we have very varied interests, and we've done in different types of things. And I think for me, everything comes down to communication, right? So we're talking about music and production and rap, and that's all communication, because communicating ideas and feelings and whatnot. I do photography. Photography is also communication. You're communicating not only the image, but the moment and whatnot there. Teaching, it's about communication as well. So there's that there. And then, putting these books and this stuff together, like, I think everything to me comes down to communication for what I seem to be geared towards.
Right.
And the idea is trying to, I guess, make that thread. So like you said, it's marketable to people or to the world. So it doesn't look like you're just scatterbrained in a bunch of things. Like, okay, well, Mike's a lawyer, but he's also doing rapping. Like, what? That doesn't make sense. But what? I mean, politician.
That's the opportunity, right? I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's KRS-One called it the continuity in opposites, which is kind of what you're talking about. Also, like finding ways to make these things that don't seem like they go together.
Right. Yeah.
So not everything you do. I mean, like, even, people think that, for example, artists, they used to spend millions of dollars on music videos. Right now, music videos aren't as important as they used to be, but people would take a loss on a lot of their music or a lot of the content associated with the music, but it was used as a commercial, right? A music video was a commercial for that.
Right.
artist, even if they're not directly making money on the video. It's just a way to increase that awareness of the brand, and hopefully it's a profitable play in the long run. But it all just increases your value, and it's not just your value in one area, right? It just increases your name recognition, your connections, your just who you are. People want to reach out to you and want to work with you, and there's crossover there. I mean, if you're doing this the right way, it's just about making yourself more desirable, more valuable in the marketplace. And I don't look at it like music is a career, or law in itself is a career, or it's a political career. I look at it like I'm living Mike Scala's life, right? Like my career is me.
I hope you
Everything
are.
I do is part of it.
Yeah. And I think, that's, it's like you said, trying to find ways to make it make sense. So that you
also makes sense to whom? Makes sense to you or to the masses?
To both. So you can best take advantage of that, right? So you can best reap the benefits of those varied interests, because you can have varied interests, but and for yourself it might make sense. But if you're going out into the world, people want to look at categories. They want to be able to pigeonhole it to some degree. Like if you show up for a job and you say, hey, I do this, and they're like, well, none of that applies here. Like, well, no, it does apply here because this is how they're commonly linked, and these skills transfer over to this sort of scenario.
Also, I think you also can break some of those stereotypes by being good at those different things. And so being a lawyer and being a hip hop artist don't have to inherently go together, but if you can do them both well, then it doesn't look so weird anymore, right? Because it looks natural. It's like, okay, so I guess you can do both, right? It might shatter people's expectations, but that's a good thing. And that's how you create that value for yourself. You're doing something other people are not doing.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, I think the word Renaissance man has to come into play here. We have to throw that around. We might need T-shirts that
honestly, I've been thinking of using that as a title for my next album, not the one I'm working on now, but if I do another one, I might call it that.
Yeah, I've been thinking that phrase has been coming, because I've been coming into my mind a lot lately, because I'm just thinking about the different stuff, the speaking and the guest lecturing, and then the music, and then teaching, and the podcasts and photography. And right now I'm working a contract with a company out here in Tokyo where I'm actually doing some app development with AI. It's just like, I guess it's that fits Renaissance man.
I'm also doing that too, by the way, not to give it all away, but my undergraduate degree was in computer science. And so I do some computer programming here and there, and I've been working on an app which will be useful in my legal career. So again, you're making things work, right? They sound like they're different disciplines and fields, but you can put them together.
Yeah. I guess the main idea of it is to do them well enough, or be able to navigate those different skill sets into something that you can take advantage of.
Right. Where it doesn't look gimmicky, doesn't look half-assed, doesn't look like you're not respecting the craft, right? You don't want to cut yourself too thin where you're not putting all of your effort into any one thing, because then you won't be great at anything. It's like the jack of all trades, master at none, right? So
I think that's the
real challenge, right? Being able to devote enough of yourself to all of what you're doing so that you're doing a good job at it and people take you seriously and treat you with respect.
Yeah, I think that's the risk right there, in having varied interests. I think when you focus on one thing, there's an easier way for it to look like you are a master of that craft, right? And so it's in that specific field that's much more marketable. You can take much more advantage of it in that. If you say that everything that I've ever done is only in this field, then when you apply for something, there is a benefit to that, because they say, okay, well, you eat, sleep, and breathe that, so there is that part as well, I think.
But it's just so hard to stand out. That's the thing, because everything is so oversaturated now. Sure, you have the benefit of looking like an expert in your field, but there might be a 1,000, a million experts in your field. Whereas if you're someone, again, if you're doing it well and you're treating it with respect, people are giving you respect because you're obviously giving respect to what you're doing. If you're that, right, and you can be unique in that, okay, there are a million rappers, but how many rapping lawyers are there? Now you stand out in a way. So now you have value. I think that's actually a benefit, an asset, not a liability if you play it the right way.
Yeah. So,
you have to be able to market yourself. Even if, let's say all you did with your life was rap, right? Let's say, and let's say hypothetically you were the best at rapping in the world. You're still not going to be marketable because who are you? How are you interesting, right? Beyond that.
Right. You still have to bring in some other abilities, like
right, and now you've got no life experiences to draw from. Right. But that's you're gonna rap about how you rap all the time. That gets boring.
Yeah.
So
there's that. Then you've got to use things like you're gonna have to have some marketing abilities and skill sets, some network abilities and skill sets.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. People always say, it's not what you know, it's who you know, but that gets, I think, misused because it's really all about networking. It's about meeting the right people, making the right connections. I think people think that you have to be born with this network. And if you're not, then you'll never get ahead. I think people use it as an excuse, right? Like this person got ahead because they knew the right person and I don't know the right people. So therefore I'm destined not to succeed. I think there's a danger in thinking that way because I didn't know people. Like you probably didn't know a lot of people until you met them, right? You have to get out there and meet people, and that just takes networking.
Yeah, absolutely. Networking is a big component of anything, I think. So, yeah, I mean, that's, I think it's a skill in itself.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And one that needs to be honed. And again, this is why you can't just focus on one thing. Even if you have just one craft or one talent that you're good at, you still have to be able to market that. And that, like you said, it takes developing your networking skills and marketing skills. And there are other things that you need to do. So you really do have to have varied interests to a certain extent, no matter what you're trying to succeed at. Yeah,
absolutely.
Anyway, dropping some knowledge here. But I do, I don't know. It does always break my heart when people communicate that they're not happy with their life, right? Like they're working a job that they hate and they don't have a career that they like, or they don't have any aspirations to reach that, and I get that not everyone can be that, but I feel like we all should strive for as close to that as possible, right? Strive to get the most out of life. And that could look a ton of different ways, whatever it means to you personally, but I think we should all try to get there, try to get as close to it as we can.
Yeah. I think unfortunately though, most people, the vast majority of people are unhappy with where they're at because things are just so different.
You would say worldwide, in the US in particular, they say Denmark is a very happy place.
I can't speak for Denmark, but let's just say in the US that if you ask people what they would really like to do, it probably wouldn't be what they were actually doing. And they're doing what they're doing in order to survive, basically, to be able to pay bills, to pay the rent, put food on the table. And sometimes you have to take what it is that you can get so that you don't fall further behind. And then it becomes something that you get stuck in, right? You can't transition out of. And it's more, okay, I'm only doing this so I can get back to my regular life. Because most people, especially people who are into things like arts and whatnot, they don't really pay very well, right? Yeah. If you want to spend your time doing some sort of artistic pursuit, you're either going to be living in a cardboard box or you're going to have to take some job that you hate.
That's not true.
For most part. I mean, how many...
Look, that's not true for myself. I make money doing things that I like, but I make money doing things that I like. I don't hate being a lawyer.
Well, yeah. But I think for the vast majority of people, I think that's the case. I think the exception is that people who really enjoy what they're doing and are able to live their life that way. But I think for the most part,
I don't think it has to be that way, right? because there are
the margins are too thin. The margins are too thin for people to be able to not do something that they don't like in order to be able to provide.
You don't think there are other things that people can find that they like also, that they can do, that they can make a living off of or can contribute to their living. I mean, like, it doesn't have to be just one thing. You can make your money in a lot of different areas.
Yeah, but if you think about it, if you're working a full 40 plus hour a week job and you've got family that you've got to take care of and provide for, you're tired.
No, but right. But you're saying you don't like that job. What I'm saying is, can they find a job that they like?
Maybe.
Like, I know a lot of people who are into art and they teach and they like teaching as well.
Yeah, but when it comes to finding, let's say, being able to provide for yourself that way, maybe it's not possible. Maybe the income you receive from that is not enough to sustain.
Right. No, it's tough. It's tough. It can be very tough for people. Absolutely. And we can't judge people and say everyone can do it just like I can do it. Of course, everyone's situation is different. But I just, I hate thinking that it's impossible, right? Like, I always think that even if it's very difficult, we can always strive for something better. Because I don't think that I'm so special. It's not like me looking down on people. I don't think that I'm that special where I'm the only person who can do this, right? I think if I can do it, other people can do it too.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. It's possible. I think just most people get so either they're at the point where they're treading water, or they're just just right below the surface that looking at other possibilities is not possible in the moment, because you got so much on your plate already that I just don't have, I can't take that risk to either pivot, or I don't have the time to think about that. And because this is what I have to make sure stays in line, or I'm going to completely drown. Yeah, I think that's where most people
and that relates. We talked about that last week, and that was the poll question. About half of New York City households now are struggling to meet their basic needs.
Right. So if you're in that position, I don't think you've got the luxury to do what it is that you really want to do. You're only struggling to make 50%. You're struggling to make your basic needs. Yeah. So like, that's all you can focus on.
You could be looking. I mean, again, everyone's situation is different, but people could be looking for different jobs. If like they're really miserable in the one job that they have, you could still work it while you try to apply for different jobs. Easier said than done, obviously. But again, this is why I say people, I think, should strive to improve their situations in that way.
If at all possible.
I just feel like if my basic philosophy, right, is like if you're doing something that doesn't make you happy, you should do whatever you can to do something else or find something that does.
I agree. I agree with that. I think just sometimes it's not as easy as that. Like I said, easier said than done.
Right. And it's never going to be perfect. And even if you find something you love, there are going to be moments where you're not happy, right? You can have bad moments, even doing things that are enjoyable to you. Like today, I actually want to talk about this because I won. Act like I should be celebrated. I helped get someone on the ballot for mayor of Yonkers, right, as an election attorney. And I'm always happy to help people because ballot access, and in New York in particular, is very archaic, right? It's very difficult to navigate. And there are so many rules and laws, statutes, case law, and all these different wrinkles in it. A lot of it doesn't even make any sense. It's why you really have to have a good lawyer who can help you with the process. Now, as I mentioned, I was successful, so I want to congratulate my candidate, and this is public record. I can say it, Margaret Fountain Coleman, who is going to be on the Democratic primary ballot for mayor of Yonkers because she was successful in her petitioning process. But here is kind of what I wanted to vent about. There are a couple areas in particular that I think we need some reforms, one of which relates to serving objections. Now, this is going to sound very boring maybe to people, but I think it's important because it's about ballot access, right? So if you want to run for office, how do you navigate this crazy maze? And I think people need to realize that the rules are not very cut and dry in many cases, right? So you would expect them to be. You would want it to be very simple, where it's like, this is what I need to do to qualify. I need to meet this or I don't. But there are a lot of areas where, quite frankly, there's just a gray area. And I think that leaves room for potential abuse, right? I'm not saying that that's the norm. But if you have a rule that applies some way, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, you can have it applied, and you do see it applied inconsistently in a way that benefits certain people and is to other people's detriment, right? So when it comes to serving objections, the idea behind this, I'll try to keep it kind of at a high level. The idea is if you're trying to knock somebody off the ballot, right, you're contesting that they don't have enough signatures or somehow they didn't qualify, they didn't do what they were supposed to do the right way to get on. You have to serve them your objections. I mean, you have to provide them a copy of your actual objections. What exactly are you objecting to about their petition or about their candidacy? And it's a way to ensure that the candidate has an opportunity to be heard, right? It's giving them sufficient notice so that they can then respond to whatever your objections are, right? It's part of due process, like we talked about. If you're going to accuse someone, you have to give them a chance to know what you're accusing them of and ample time to respond. So right. The state election law was just amended last month, and New York State's election law now requires you to serve these objections on a candidate by overnight mail. That was never in the law before, right? It's now part of the state election law. But in addition to that being law, there is also a provision in the law that allows local boards of election to set their own rules when it comes to objections. Okay, there is a whole rule book basically that the New York State Board of Elections uses, and a lot of local boards of election, like the Westchester County Board that I was in today, they also use. So they use the State Board of Election rules in addition to the state election law. Now, the state rules say that if you're going to serve someone with objections, you have to send them via certified or registered mail. That's different from the state election law now saying it's got to be overnight mail, right? And in fact, it's possible to send something overnight and certified registered, but it's a very weird thing, right? Those are two different types of mail. It's possible to do it if you live close enough to someone, like, or if you go to the post office close enough to someone where you're sending it certified or registered, but they're going to get it the next day. But it's still two different types of mail. So really, technically, to comply with both, you would send two different mailings out, right? Like you do an overnight mail, and then you would send it to them certified or registered, which is just weird. And it's not really what was intended. I think because you have this conflict now, I think the state election law intends for it to be overnight mail, but you have local boards saying we still follow the state rules, which still say certified or registered mail. So there needs to be some kind of clarification there. If a local board is using those rules, they need to be able to say, well, accept that one, right? Like when it comes to serving objections, we mean overnight, because otherwise you're going to get all kinds of litigation. You're going to get lawsuits. And I brought that up today. It turned out to be a moot point because my candidate qualified for the ballot anyway. And so we didn't have to get into whether she was served correctly. But as I've talked about, I've got one of the landmark cases in New York election law on serving objections. I was the lawyer for it. And it stands for this notion that you have to strictly comply with the rules if you're going to knock somebody off the ballot. And strictly speaking, right now, the rules would have both, right? If the state election law is in effect, which it is, saying that overnight mail is required, and if the board is binding itself to the rules, which state that certified mail is required, to satisfy both, you would have to do it both ways. Again, I don't think that was what anyone intended, but you have to clarify this. Otherwise, you're going to get a ton of lawsuits on the point. If someone doesn't do it both ways, it's going to end up in court. And so I brought this up. I said, look, I know it's moot, not in court. I'm sorry. I brought this up at the board today. I said, I know it's moot at this point because we qualify. We're good. But you might want to clarify this one point because you're going to invite a lot of litigation on the issue if you don't. And I kind of got some pushback. I think they were a little defensive that I even brought it up. Basically, their attitude was, you won anyway. Why are you even saying anything? But I thought it was an important point to clarify. I wasn't trying to call anyone out or embarrass anyone. I pointed out that on the Westchester Board's own website right now, it says basically both are in effect, right? It says, here are our guidelines for running for office and for the petitioning process. And it says, don't just use these guidelines. See also the New York State election law. See also these rules. Well, if you look at both of them, they're in conflict right now. So you need to have that clarification there. That this is my legal opinion. There needs to be a rule passed by these boards saying that we are empowered to pass our own rules when it comes to objections. We're not going to use that rule requiring requiring certified mail. We're going to follow the state law, which now says it has to be overnight mail. But if you don't do that, it's ambiguous and you're going to have problems.
It sounds like they should be more clear on what they're saying, and like, why wouldn't they want to be? That's kind of what I'm wondering.
Honestly, I think this was an oversight. This law, the election law, just changed last month, and they did tell me, well, sometimes it takes a while for our website to be updated. But honestly, that posting on their website came after the law changed, so that's not really a good excuse. But I think it was an oversight. I don't think they intended to be confusing. And I actually have to say the Westchester County Board has been very pleasant, very professional, very chill, very friendly. You know, sometimes you're dealing with these matters and you get people who kind of act like they don't want you to call them or talk to them. They can't tell you anything, get out of my face, you know, very adversarial. This wasn't the case with them at all. And also, I got to say, they're new at this. They don't usually hold hearings there, but now they are. This is the first year where they're doing hearings and they're doing this process. And so there is a learning curve there, and I understand that. But, you know, I was trying to make sure that that was cleared up, because there are a lot of people in the room also who I was told were there to observe because this is new for them. And so they're trying to get this all together. And so I thought it was appropriate for me to say, hey, listen, guys, you might want to look out for this thing.
Yeah, I mean, it could have just been taken aback by, you know, big city lawyers telling us that we're doing it wrong. And then got
big city lawyer. Come on, this is Yonkers, this is White Plains. I'm not that far from the city.
Yeah, but you know, they're in their town, and so you're telling them that, and so they could have had an initial knee-jerk reaction to it, and then
I think it was just defensiveness because maybe it came off like I was trying to call them out on something or embarrass them, but that wasn't the case, you know. And
and so maybe they'll change it. Maybe they'll sit back and you know what?
I think so.
He's right,
because it's frustrating not having that clarity, because when I'm advising clients now, I won't know what to tell them. I mean, I'll tell them my experience. I'll say, well, this is what the board has been doing. But yeah, there's really no clear answer on it because they're saying that both are in effect, but they contradict each other.
Right.
You know?
So
there was another point I wanted to bring up. Go ahead.
The idea is I guess not idea, but I guess just keep an eye on the law in there and see if they change it as per your suggestion.
Yeah. The other and you know, and I said that when we do clarify, when people have been calling us, we clarify what our rule is. I mean, come on, that's good to do, but you know that's not going to save you from lawsuits. That's not going to work. You have to have that in your rules. You have to have that very explicit, you know?
Yeah, especially if
I would have, and I'll be honest with you, if my client didn't qualify for the ballot on her signatures, I would have looked at that route, right? I would have said, well, service was done overnight, but the state rule says they have to be served by certified mail, and they didn't do it. You know, it became moot in our case because she had the signatures.
Right. Yeah, I think that's your point is definitely valid, and they'll probably see that. Because like I said, if your signatures, if someone is at risk of being kicked off the ballot and they can point out that one of these things weren't followed, and be like, hey, well, you know, your rules are ambiguous. Like, it's not really our fault.
Right. And the case that I argued, which is cited by courts, right? You'll see judges actually citing to my case in their decisions now on this issue. It says very clearly that those rules may not be disregarded and they must be strictly followed. And so that would come up as precedent, you know, and those rules say certified or registered mail. That's why I kind of like my kind of flag went up in the first place. I was like, wait a minute, these objections were served overnight. They weren't certified mail. I argued the case on that. I know they got to be certified mail, but they just changed the election law last month. And I think what needs to happen also is those rules should probably change, not just the county board, right? Like I think Westchester should go in and say, we don't follow all these rules anymore because they have the option to do that. They're empowered by the election law to do that. I think that the actual rules should change so that there's not an inconsistency with the election.
Right. Yeah. It makes a lot of sense.
So the other point I wanted to mention on this, which was a little bit frustrating, was the inconsistency when it comes to someone signing a petition at an address that's different from where they're registered to vote. Because the law is that you're allowed to move into a district, or in this case, into a city, right? You can move into Yonkers. You're allowed to sign a petition, and a petition is a legal document. When you're signing it, you're swearing that you live at that address now, right? So you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to, let's say you just moved into Yonkers last week. You're allowed to sign a petition, and you're supposed to put your current address, which is where you just moved to, even if your registration address is different. That's not supposed to invalidate the signature. But that gets very messy when it comes to how do you prove that that's the same person, right? So what will happen is the objector will object to those signatures, and they'll say that we looked this person up, we looked this address up. There's no voter registered at that address, therefore it's an invalid signature, right? then the burden is on the candidate to prove that it is a valid signature. But what is the burden of proof there? I've been in court where the judge looked at the voter registration card, like how they signed their name when they signed up to vote, and compared it to the signature on the petition. And if it looked close enough, they gave it to us. And usually that's kind of a toss up. Like if you argue 100 of those, you probably get 50. Like it seems to go back and forth on that. So if you're the campaign, you want to argue as many of those as possible, try to get as many of those in, knowing that the more you argue, the more you'll win. But not all courts do it that way. And sometimes the board will match the signatures and sometimes the board won't, right? So last year I had a client who was before
do it again. Sometimes the what?
Sometimes the board will match the signatures to restore the signature to the petition, and sometimes they won't. Sometimes they'll leave it as a bad signature and make you go to court to do it.
Okay, I got you.
Because what the board often says is that they're not a fact-finding body. You know, they don't really take in evidence. Certain things they'll look at, like they'll look at affidavits from people saying the move, although that now is changing in some cases too. They'll look at certain things, but overall, generally speaking, they look at the records that they have. And so if there's no voter registered at that address, it's presumptively a bad signature to them. Now you can go to court and you can provide extra evidence to a judge and say, hey, listen, look at their signature, match it up, or here's testimony from someone, here's all those other things. The board doesn't do that, right? They just look at the papers. In court, you can start introducing other evidence to prove that that person is who they say they are. But like I was saying, last year I had a client who was running for Congress, and in the New York City Board of Elections, we got the board to verify signatures. They don't always do that, but because the law says that just because the address is different, it doesn't invalidate their signature, they were following that and they started doing that. They were looking up the records and they said, okay, even if the address is different, this signature looks like the person who signed the petition. That's a good signature, Right. Today, when I was at the board, not only did they refuse to do that, they took it a step further. They wouldn't even take an affidavit from the person saying that that's who they are, because I had an affidavit from a voter who was actually a witness to the petition saying that, listen, I did witness this petition. I am registered at this address. I just moved. Here's my new address. I put my new address on the petition. It is me, signed, notarized, everything, right? Normally that's good enough, even for the board. The board wouldn't take it. And they told me today that a judge up there also wouldn't take that affidavit. And they mentioned a fraud case that's been happening. I won't go into details on that, but basically because there's been a fraud case on petitioning up there, they're more strict on what they're going to accept and what they're not going to accept as proof. And so they wouldn't even take that affidavit. What they were saying is the judge wanted an affidavit plus either a driver's license, utility bill, phone bill, something like that, some other documentary evidence proving that you live at that address, which to me is a way too restrictive view.
And it doesn't necessarily prove anything either. Like your address on your driver's license could be different from where you actually live because you could have moved or something.
Right. But if you have a new driver's license with that address on it, that does serve as proof that the address, helps, right? That what you signed, if you signed it at that address, that's you. But, listen, and that could be appealed. And my hunch is that on appeal, that probably will be overturned because the rule is having a different address does not invalidate the signature. Now, again, it comes to what kind of proof is required. But to me, that's way more than what's ever been required. And I don't think that was ever the intention to require that much. I mean, could you imagine having to show up to the board or to court with, 200 utility bills? Now that's not how this is supposed to work.
Right. Yeah, that's.
But we're in a situation now where there's no consistency here, right? And this is what came out at the hearing today. Some judges require different proofs than others. Some boards will look at the signatures and match them. Some won't. So right. That's a problem, right? I think there needs to be a state law now saying what they have to do. Either you take this kind of evidence or you don't, or this is the kind of evidence you need. It should be consistent across all cases so that the board can't decide or a judge can't decide, you know what, in this particular case, I'm going to do it this way. Because again, as a lawyer, you can't advise your clients what to do. They don't have a sense as to what they need to do. And then it opens the door to all kinds of potential abuse where if you don't like the person, you're going to say, I'm going to require such a high standard of evidence here because I can.
Right. It sounds a little bit like just chaos in action to some degree. And I understand that probably the idea is to let everyone have a little bit of autonomy in the situation, but some things do need to have standards and set rules so that it's very easy to make the process work. So you have less litigation, you have less court time, you have less run around, and you can just get things moving smoother.
Right. Someone said to me once, isn't it very black and white when it comes to petitioning, right? Like you either have the signatures or you don't. And I said, no, it's really not. Everything is a shade of gray, right? And there's oftentimes so much inconsistency in the rules and how they're applied that even for lawyers, it makes our heads spin. And then we can't advise clients. People ask me, so what do I need to do? What is accepted and what's not? And I got to tell them, well, it just kind of depends on how they're feeling that day or what judge we get. That's crazy. It shouldn't be that way.
It really shouldn't be. It really shouldn't be that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But obviously the lesson here, though, if you're being prudent, try to have people sign your petition who are registered where they sign, right? The best way to do it is with a walk list. Like if you're going door to door, usually you get better results because you know that person's registered there because you're going to them, right? You're saying, I'm finding this person at this address. I'm going to go right to them to get their signature. That's those signatures are going to be more reliable. Obviously, it's easier to get signatures on the street. They call it bulk petition, and people, and that's valid also. But you have to understand, you probably need a lot more of them because so many more of them now are being tossed out, and the standards, it seems, are becoming more strict to get those in. If the address doesn't match, the law says they're supposed to count. But how do you prove that? Is it worth even getting all that proof necessary? If you got 1,000 of these, you're going to go out and you can get 1,000 utility bills from people now. Like that's probably not the use of your time. You should probably do it a different way.
And I think it's also, try to get way more than you need because you're going to be fighting something like this. Like if you need 1,000, then try to get 3,000.
Yeah, definitely. I would say, at least 3x if you can. And this is expensive too. And that's the other thing. People try to volunteer. It's very difficult. And, like you said, if you need 1,000, you're getting 3,000. It's tough to do that with a few volunteers. You probably need to pay people. Yeah.
And you mentioned walk lists and that, and it just reminds me of what was that, to 2012 when we were out hitting the streets and going door to door, knocking on doors, getting these signatures and whatnot. And the walk list, it was our first time out doing it, and we had the raw data. And I remember just utilizing just some tools that we put together ourselves to create those walk lists, because we couldn't afford the Van and all of those types of softwares. But that, it definitely helped.
But what was also crazy about that year? They were still trying to determine what the district lines were.
Yeah.
And so that's crazy. Think about that, right? When people talk about the game being rigged, this is an example, I think, of that. The district was not finalized, but petitioning had begun already. And so you were getting signatures from people not knowing if they would still be in the district by the time petitioning was over. And so we had to guess which areas we thought were still going to be in.
And the district number changed like mid-campaign.
You're right. And the lines changed mid-campaign.
Yeah. That's crazy.
We had to think, okay, Jamaica is going to be in, so we can focus on here. But certain areas that were like by the borders, we kind of had to stay away from because we thought we could lose them.
Right. Yeah. Things like that. And just, you would think, and I think the average person would think, like, this stuff should be, pretty cut and dry. Like, it shouldn't be that ambiguous. It shouldn't be moving like that, especially in the middle of
in the middle of the game. They changed the rules in the middle of the game.
Yeah.
And as we saw today, they can change at the end of the game also. I think a lot of it is going to require changing state law to clarify some of these points.
Yeah. So.
And I know we have a lot of senators, or just a few senators and assembly people who watch us, so maybe they can start working on this.
Yes, get on it. But again, it's I'm sure at some point, or you'd like to believe at some point, the rules came about the way that they were with people trying to do something in earnest, right? And just maybe over time, you've got a bunch of different things added and things became a little convoluted. So we should always, just like, we say before, is try to work towards that more perfect situation. Like always look, find a better way to do it. Like, okay, well, you know what? We did it this way in the past and it worked for that. But now this is a factor as well. So now let's change that and make it work a little bit better and smoother.
Right. Yeah, right. And that's to live, right? Like perfect example. I love practicing election law. I hate all this, but you know what? I love now striving to fix all of this, right, and make it a little bit better. It's so you need that drama, right? You need those problems, you need those obstacles, because that's really what creates interest and things to aspire to do, to achieve, right? It's like things we want to accomplish in our life, right? You kind of need that adversity to have a successful and happy and productive life, don't you?
Yeah, and if you're not willing to do that, and that's personal to business, if you're not willing to look to refine and improve at every step, and whether it's personal, whether it's business, whether it's politics or laws or whatever, then we're going to be stagnant. Things aren't going to, you're going to be putting themselves into more issues than might be necessary.
Right.
So. Yeah, I think sounds like something maybe that, like I said, if someone's watching, take some steps to do it. It's already been called for. Just remember, it was called for. Scala called it.
Yeah, no, we definitely got to keep an eye on that and keep holding people's feet to the fire,
Yeah, definitely.
So, all right, why don't we look at our poll results from last week, because we also talked about striving to make things better. And that was in the context of the cost of living, right? We talked about how half of New York City households now can't afford to meet their basic needs. And we asked the people if they thought that we had to do more to regulate the cost of living. Now, we put this on various social media platforms. Seems the combined results here are 85% yes, 15% no.
Yeah, I think I agree. I mean, we definitely should do more. We need to do more. It's if you've got a situation where 50% of the people giving best efforts can't afford to live or just barely hanging on, I mean, that's pretty good indication that the system is broken.
And that's what we try to do.
Well, I have some comments here that I thought were interesting, because some people don't see it as a problem, or at least it seems that way.
In light of the fact.
I've got a comment here that says, do you think we should change laws and make it affordable to live in New York? Or should New York be a nice place for rich people who make it, and those who can't afford it should live somewhere else? Isn't it like basic demand and supply? Everyone wants to live in New York, but there's limited room. Not everyone can live here, so prices go up. Then they say, however, basic things that everybody needs everywhere, like food, water, and electricity, shouldn't get arbitrarily high prices. It should cost damn near what it costs to make with a small markup, and that's it. So a bit of a mixed response there.
Yeah, I think stuff like utilities and stuff, I don't think it should be like a major profit generator. Stuff that's really basic like that. Like I agree with that there should be just a small markup. To cover expenses and whatnot, but like to make it a major profit thing. I think it's the same to me. I think it's probably similar, or should be similar in medical fields. Like people shouldn't have to pay 10 times something just to be able to try and survive.
But what about this idea that basically certain places don't have to be affordable? Not everyone should be able to afford New York.
That's true too, but I think the problem becomes you then price out people who are from there.
Right.
And you see that, like I think we mentioned last time in Hawaii, locals are having to leave the island. It's the place where they're from. They may even, have native Hawaiian roots, but because this is paradise and rich people want to come there and it's beautiful weather and they're jacking up the prices, now the people who are from there may even be indigenous to there or have generational history there, can't even afford to live there anymore because someone wants to come there and make it their playground. I don't think that's right. And I think it's happening in New York a lot too. A lot of New Yorkers are leaving New York, even though their family's been there for generations. And they can't afford it anymore because, so I don't think that's right.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, do you want it to be a place where the natives have to move and you're just bringing in wealthy people from other places? Then you're losing the character of what it made it New York or whatever place it was in the first place, right? I don't think that's the solution.
I think one of the examples, I mean, it's kind of the example of gentrification, basically, to some degree. And we saw that with, Manhattan started to get so expensive. So people went down to like Alphabet City, and that started to get more expensive. And then so people went over to what was it, Williamsburg. And but the people that were in these places had to end up moving somewhere else because now the influx of people from outside are coming in and making it more expensive.
Right. Yeah, I think we want to preserve the areas that we live in and that we love, right? I mean, we want to keep New York, New York, right? We don't want to kick all native New Yorkers out. Someone says here, Florida is absolutely so hard to survive in as well. I mean, yeah, it's not just New York, certainly.
No, everywhere is exploding. And it's funny, like, remember there was an article probably in the last couple of years talking about this no place in the US that you can afford to live below this certain amount of income, which was not really cheap. And I was just scrolling through TikTok the other day. No, I was playing a video game on my phone. And one of the ads in between the Scrabble rounds was for apartments here in Japan, and they were starting at 20,000 yen a month, which 20,000 yen a month is probably somewhere around $200 a month. And of course, there's smaller apartments, but just that those options are available, I think is a good thing.
Comment here says we need to do more to lower the cost of living, but they voted no because most of that work, according to this comment, is deregulating. They say housing needs to be easier to build, medical care needs to be easier to provide.
It sounds like a contradiction to some degree, because deregulating is going to skyrocket the prices. It's going to make it more difficult.
I think what they're saying is basically get rid of the regulations so people can do what they do. Like people can just build the housing that they want to build without having to pay more and deal with all of these regulations and the red tape.
But then the prices are going to go up at an astronomical
on
rate.
the consumer's end.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That might be what they're
people
missing.
are going to be able to afford it less.
Right.
We had a comment
I mean, it's just kind of a certain philosophy that some people have. I think what they're thinking is if it's cheaper to build, then it should be cheaper for the people to rent it, right? Like if the person has to spend a ton of money to build it, then they're going to charge more on the back end.
Yeah. I don't know. That's I think the idea is more like you hear that a little bit more from conservatives, right? They have this idea that they want.
It's like a libertarian type viewpoint.
All shackles off, or all kind of control or rules off, because then it would be more free. And in a sense, that's true, but that means the other person is free to do something that's
do what they want to you.
Not exactly, not in your best interest. And so I think there has to be a balance there,
right?
Especially if we're in a society. I think the government has a responsibility to try to balance that, because everyone's contributing in this society. You have to have something that's equitable. We had a comment on the poll on YouTube on this poll, and it said that it's not socialism when all you're doing is giving someone a hand up, not a handout, and common sense human dignity, affordable shelter / housing from all the stuff that happens. So it sounds like they were in favor of having a little bit more regulation to make things more affordable.
And also, why is the argument always whether something is socialism or not? Can't we just look at the merits of the idea? We weren't even asking about socialism, but it's like is that like the Red Scare still? Is that just like is that like communism? People are still afraid of the USSR?
I think it is. Like, the right has made it such a boogeyman that it's the buzzword.
That wasn't even part of what we were asking, though.
Right.
I guess people just associate regulation, but it's regulation.
Yeah.
That's not automatically socialist or communist, right?
I guess it's regulation in order to make things more cost of living more affordable. So you're kind of taking maybe a socialist view that everything should be spread out. But
it doesn't have to be that. I mean, it just seems like people want to inject that into every conversation when all we asked about was regulation.
Yeah, it's still the boogeyman. Socialism's still the boogeyman, although I think it has been kind of replaced as the boogeyman talking point, or at least superseded by woke on the right, even though they get it completely wrong, and everybody's definition of woke that's out there screaming against it is not even what woke means. So
yeah,
it's ridiculous.
Well, keep the comments coming.
In the comment, Lixa said there has to be a balance where regulations don't impact businesses from building and doing business. It's tricky. Now, see, I think that's...
Well, hold on a second. So she's saying that she doesn't want... So she's saying there needs to be regulation, but not so much regulation that businesses are crippled. That's what she's saying?
Right. And so I get it. I think there's also something there that needs to be talked about. Like, should businesses supersede individuals, right? But
that's the balance that she's talking about, right? I think she's trying to say, let's have a system where we're not trampling on each other's rights, right? Let's somehow find that balance where we can coexist, where businesses can thrive, but so can individuals that they're serving.
Right. I think that's where we need to, because I would think businesses come second to individuals. But then again...
Right, but her point, though, is that if the businesses cannot even operate, then they can't serve the individuals.
Right. So there's a balance there that needs to be had.
Right, which is why we say regulation. And it's also why we always have this conversation. And it seems to be whatever poll we put out there, people want to take things to the extreme. Like if we talk about constitutional rights, they think it means like Second Amendment means that, no guns whatsoever, or on the side, every gun would, like there's always a limitation to what we're talking about. When we say regulation, we're never talking about 1,000% one way or the other. There's always going to be a balancing act. There's always going to be a limitation to it. But, some people seem to have this philosophy that like any regulation means crippling regulation.
Right.
Right.
So I take her point. Yeah. I mean, there should be a balance. And to your point right there, we just got a comment on one of our previous polls that kind of speaks to that. And this person just keeps commenting. Apparently they've got a lot to say. And this was on the poll that said, do you agree with Florida's concealed carry gun laws? Because they had just allowed it to where anyone could do it without a permit. And so this person went there like, because 100% I agree with it, because it's constitutionally protected, God-given right. Why should anyone be stripped of their rights if they aren't a criminal? If it was your daughter, you'd want her carrying the best form of protection, wouldn't you? First of all, no, it's not a God-given right.
And it's not even a constitutional right. Right. I don't know where people are getting this idea from. The Constitution doesn't guarantee the right to concealed carry.
It's the extremity, right? Going to the extremes, right?
Right.
What is this? They go even deeper into like comparing it with 175 children have died from school shootings since 1998 in this country. 4,500 are killed every year by doctors and medical malpractice. 400,000 go missing in this country every year, and estimated 180,000 are trafficked over the border to Mexico. So what is the real problem facing children? Like, that doesn't mean you don't look at one because there's problems in the other. Like,
right. That seems kind of scatterbrained and off topic.
It's more like, I just want my guns, right? And I found it funny because their handle is their username on here is Armed Preacher. So I mean,
appropriate name.
Yeah, God, it's their God-given right.
Armed Preacher.
But it speaks to that extreme position that you mentioned.
Yeah, and someone literally said this to me not long ago, that the Second Amendment means any weapon that I want.
Right.
They actually thought that. But there are a lot of people who think that. Like, this seems to be a talking point nowadays. It's not accurate.
Right. We can't go to extremes on anything. I mean, it can't be too constricting or conservative, and it can't be just too loosey-goosey liberal. Like, there has to be some kind of structure. There has to be some nuance. Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, that's what we strive to find here. And it's not always popular. I think sometimes people just want the rah, rah, rah talking point, but I think there is
Right.
value in trying to get to that nuance and looking at it from a more measured perspective, right? Because when
Right.
you implement these things, you have to take all different types of factors into account. You can't just be your feelings or your emotions or I want my gun or whatever it is. You have to think about society, the individual, people's rights, how we can respect rights without trampling on other people's rights, and so forth.
And I'm let me propose this here. Like, what if could you create a religion around the gun and then get around certain laws? Because then it would be
your First Amendment right to free exercise.
right.
People have tried that type of thing. I mean, it's very commonly used with vaccines, right?
I think it's been tried, or at least the thought process was with like the Rastafarian religion. Like, well, marijuana's in our religion. This was before it was legal. Like,
Yeah.
So, I have the religious right to smoke weed.
But
I don't know if
it goes back to the whole point about none of these rights being unlimited. So it's not like a trump card you're pulling is I win no matter what because it says this. There are other things. Right. Back to the discussion about the election law, right? There's the state election law saying one thing. There's a state rule now saying something else. And sometimes you do have these conflicts and you have to try to work them out. And, if they directly contradict each other, hopefully there is some clarity on that to clear up the contradiction. But oftentimes what you have is things that aren't directly or inherently in conflict, but they can be in conflict depending on how they're applied. And you kind of alluded to it there, right? What if your religious beliefs have you doing things that are otherwise illegal?
Right.
Balancing act there. It's never one that just Trump always, you can't make a religion that says, we go around killing people and therefore murder laws don't apply to me. Right? That's not going to work. People should understand that that's not going to fly.
Right. Maybe we should take one section, just like one section of a state, like let's say part of Montana, that's just like uninhabited, and just be like, okay, look, this is the lawless zone. Anyone that wants to live there with zero regulations, zero rules, it's a free for all. You can go there and do whatever you want. Just see how that works out.
There is something like that, isn't there? Or there was always a story
talking about the purge.
The what?
The purge.
No. There was always a story about jurisdiction in one of these national parks, like on the border. I forget exactly where it was, but it was somewhere in that region of the U.S. where they were like, basically it's no man's land because no one has jurisdiction to enforce the law there.
I think you might be talking about there's a portion, maybe it's near Death Valley, California, where it's like kind of that no man's land. I thought it might have been
like Yosemite.
I don't know. I think
something like it's under federal jurisdiction, but state crimes don't apply, people would say, because it doesn't belong to any particular state or something like that.
Oh, okay. Now I seem to recall something about an area in near Death Valley that it's so remote and it's just like not uninhabitable, it's unhospitable because it's so hot or whatever. People don't live there or whatever. So there's really no law that's governing that region. I have to look it up, but I think that was what I was thinking of.
I mean, people do this all the time too, right? They go off the grid or they go to Mexico somewhere and they just live off the land.
You get far enough away from people, you can have less laws affecting you the further you get away. Like if you go into somewhere in like the Rocky Mountains, 500 miles away from civilization,
500 years ago,
probably live any way you want, or go to Antarctica. There's really no laws up there.
I think there are 2 ATM machines in Antarctica now, or at least one.
Really?
Oh yeah, there's a whole base. Scientists stay there.
Yeah, I know a couple of countries have bases there, but no one really claims the land. It's the biggest unoccupied or unclaimed piece of land on the planet.
Yeah. Well, I guess speaking of claiming things, you mentioned that there is a class action settlement, is it, against Facebook, where people can claim a piece of it because they allegedly violated our privacy?
Yes. So there is and I don't know what happened. I just I just had it up. But yes, there is a class action settlement that where Facebook has agreed to pay $725 million. And so anybody can join in on this. And you might have seen it when you logged into Facebook at some point in this past week. I know I did when I logged in on mobile. It showed up at the top, and it kind of looked like it was kind of a spam thing, but it really isn't.
Did you claim it?
I haven't yet. I've got the website that I can go to, and you just go in there and you put your info in. So if you were a Facebook user, anytime between May 24th, 2007 and December 22nd, 2022, then you can jump in on this and receive something from the class action. Now, Facebook's got billions. And if you're in the US, only US residents.
Residents, so you can get it even in Japan.
I have to look into that, yeah. But okay. I've been on Facebook since, I don't know, 2008, 9, something like that. So I should be eligible as well. And this comes from Facebook's sharing of people's private data. And I think it had to do with being with the Cambridge Analytica scandal, the consulting firm that was working with Trump's campaign. And the firm, they harvested data from about 87 million Facebook users. And so Facebook didn't properly protect that, or they shared too much. And so, yeah, you can go there. Now, it's a class action lawsuit, so that means it's open for everyone that was, eligible. So you could end up with, $100, you can end up with 50 cents, depending on how many people.
It depends on how many people make a claim.
Right. So.
Okay. So should you be telling people about this?
Yes. Do not go there.
Against your own interest for the greater good.
Yeah. But if you go look it up, it'll be on there. You should be able to find the website. Actually, I'll probably put the link in the chat.
Okay.
So that people can at least look into it, check it out. I mean, someone's going to get that $725 million. So
might as well be you.
Absolutely.
It's funny. On that note, I actually got a letter from the IRS saying I overpaid a portion of my taxes. I'm getting a partial refund. I say partial because I still ended up owing a lot that I paid, right? But on the portion that was pre-taxed, apparently I get something coming back to me. So a little moral victory, I suppose, even though I paid out the nose.
Yeah. I'm not getting anything back, I'm sure. But, who knows? Maybe with this this class action, I might, get enough to cover my taxes. Who knows? I probably only get like 10 cents. Though.
I was going to say, you're banking on people just not taking advantage of this at all.
Yeah. I'd hope so. Now imagine if no one took advantage of it. Would one person get the whole 175 million?
Imagine oh yeah, we notified them, but they really didn't, but they said that they did.
Yeah. What if could I start a campaign telling people don't sign up for this. It's a scam. They're trying to get your stuff. And then really put people off on it. And then I'd be the only one to sign up.
And then we'll all be suing you for the money. But what's funny? I was actually thinking something like that. But seriously, I wonder if there are people who would be afraid to sign up for it, thinking that it's going to harm them somehow. Either their data is going to be manipulated or it's a scam, like you said, or, they're just not trusting of it.
Well, it's not a very good looking website, and it kind of does have a scammy look to the website that you go there and do it, but it is legit. And it's called FacebookUserPrivacySettlement.com, which the name in itself kind of seems harmless.
Are you sure it's not like a Nigerian prince running this thing?
Right. No, but it is legit. It should have popped up on your Facebook when you logged in at some point.
I didn't see it.
Yeah. Licks in the chat says a lot of people saw the notification and posted it was a scam. Yeah, it's not a scam. It is it's very real. And of course, do your own due diligence as well. Look up the Facebook settlement. You'll see numerous news articles from reputable organizations that linking to the site that give this. So yeah. Check it out.
Maybe people are saying it's a scam to dissuade them from taking advantage of it.
It's possible. It could be. I'm going to look into it though. Yes, it's in your notification in the app. Yes, he looks like got it too. So
Okay. Got a nice comment here from John McLaughlin saying, Mike, we are very fortunate to have your expertise and leadership as our campaign attorney. Great job and thank you. Well, thank you, John. It's a pleasure.
Awesome. Super awesome. So
yeah. So, all right. Before we wrap up, we wanted to put out the poll question, and I guess it was going to be on this topic of data security, right?
Yeah. All right. I can take a stab at
Let's
it.
go for it.
All right. So the poll question of the week. Are you concerned about how social media companies use and share your usage data? How that?
Good question.
Yeah. And I think we all should be.
Right.
And I know especially things are gonna just keep ramping up, especially with AI and whatnot coming on. Because now there's, in the past week they've been talking about, and we talked about this a few weeks ago. People are getting hip to these scams, these AI voice cloning scams.
Oh yeah.
So
I'm seeing a lot of covers posted on YouTube of well-known songs covered by another artist with an
and I've got one
AI voice.
And I've got one. I'm going to be posting that probably this week. So I people might not know, but you remember I did the pre-Kardashian Kanye freestyle, and so like I wrote it in to style of college dropout Kanye,
right?
And so I wrapped it in that type of style. Just talking about we kind of want the old Kanye back some. And so with AI, I took my instrumental and dropped the Kanye voice over it, and so now Kanye's rapping that, and it sounds like Kanye rapped the song. So it
sounds like he's dissing himself.
Yeah, so it's pretty crazy. But I will be posting that this week. I thought it was kind of funny. But what's happening, which is more insidious, like that's more of a joke thing. There have been people using it for other things, like just mentioned in the chat, the Drake and the Weeknd song that came out.
Oh, yeah.
It went out and everyone thought it was a real Drake and the Weeknd release, and it had millions of views. And then Spotify and Apple Music and everything, all that pulled it because this was not Drake and the Weeknd. This was AI voice cloning.
Right.
But so that's going to be an issue. But the big thing is where people are going to train voice models to sound like you. And so basically they could call your mother up with your voice and say, hey, I'm in trouble.
I need money.
Send me some money here. And it's your voice, it's you speaking. And so she's probably not going to think twice about it. So I suggest people are going to have passwords, safe words with friends and family.
We used to do that, like that back in the school days, right? Like your mom would say, I don't know, does you ever hear about this? Like if a stranger comes and says, your mom said to give you a ride home, you have to say, what is the password?
Right, absolutely. And I think the first people that are going to be taken advantage of in this situation are going to be probably the elderly, because it's going to be less up on the new technology. I saw a thing on TikTok. A girl was talking about this, and she was kind of crying and whatnot. But someone did this with her family and called up saying that her brother died.
Wow. And
so they were all, in shock over it because they believed it because it was a family member's voice. And so, that was kind of messed up. But it's
crazy. Horrible.
And we are at risk, especially a year's worth of podcasting. Our voice, our speaking voice, there's a ton of data out there. A model could be trained on us.
Yeah, absolutely. The old school way was to take all of that audio and find us saying those actual words and try to chop them together. And then it will be chopping. You could usually tell. But this is obviously way more advanced.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but anybody that's ever posted anything on publicly or said anything publicly, your voice is out there and it's at risk of being used. There's going to have to be laws. It's going to have to catch up with this. And there's going to have to be people's understanding is going to have to acclimate to what this new world is.
Right. So while we have this technology, the two covers that I thought were pretty good, pretty well done, were actually a Biggie. He did New York State of Mind and Shook Ones.
Yeah. I think the one of the best ones is a cover of Kanye West singing Justin Bieber's Love Yourself.
Okay. I didn't hear that.
Like it sounds perfect. It's like, dang, like Kanye can sing? Like what?
Yeah. But it's funny because I bet that artists are going to use AI to help them in their actual song making now.
Well, that's another part of the question now. Like, so does the label need Drake if they've got Drake's voice?
Or anyone. Yeah, or anyone, right? Like you could just make up an artist.
I think about this. You've got hundreds, thousands of hours of Michael Jackson's acapellas.
Right.
So if you write a song and use that, you can create a new Michael Jackson song, and Michael Jackson's not even around anymore. Like,
yeah,
this is
it isn't quite there yet. I mean, you mentioned that there's some that sound pretty good. I mean, you could usually tell that it's a little bit off, right? Like, but it's getting better.
Well, the way to make it sound the best is you have to be. So what you do first is when you're making these songs, right? It's not just the AI. You just type the words in. Like if you type the words in and the AI does it, then it's going to be really off. With this voice cloning is you go ahead and perform the song,
right?
And you take that acapella and run it through AI, and then AI exchanges out the voice cloning for whoever that person is. And so if you do it in that way, you're going to get much better results because if you're saying
what they're doing now, that they're taking acapellas of existing songs and feeding it to the AI, yeah.
Or they're recording it themselves in that style and then using their acapella. And
not the one that you see like Biggie rapping New York State of Mind. That wasn't some kid rapping it. That was just the Nas acapella.
Right. They took the Nas acapella. Right.
Yeah.
But in that case, it's still there's a performance first, and then they put a clone on top of that.
Yeah, you have to know, the AI has to know that the inflection and the flow and the cadence.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that is how it's done. So, if someone say, for example, they wrote a new song, a Michael Jackson song, and then someone sang it in Michael Jackson style, and then they used the voice cloning to put Michael Jackson's voice on it. Now you've got a new product. And that's what happened with that Drake and the Weeknd.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to be allowed to do that? Like, should we? I don't think we should. That's kind of crazy.
Who would even know, right? That's the thing. Like let's say we were to do that for our own music. Like, let's say there's a verse that like we just can't get. Like we write it, but we can't get it to sound the way we want it to. That we just have an AI rap it for us. Everyone will think it's us. No one's gonna, right? They're not gonna know.
Yeah. I mean that's kind of what happens with if you think about if you do reference tracks, right? Like how Jay-Z wrote Still Dre. Jay-Z rapped it and sent Dre the track. And then Dre raps it. Same with Puff. Puff raps. So does Puff even have to get on it now? Like, if his voice is trained, can he just like, okay, I got the acapella, thanks, I'm gonna run it through AI.
Like auto-tune also, right? I mean, it's kind of similar to auto-tune also. Like you can't hit a note, but the only difference is you could usually tell that effect is on the voice, so you're not necessarily tricking people.
Right. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of questions. There's going to be a lot of issues. And then who is it? There's I forget the name of it. There's a younger artist out now. She's the daughter of somebody, but she put out. She said, "Okay, anyone's allowed to use my voice to make songs and anything," and then we split it 50-50. So she gave the world permission to use her voice.
So
now it's going to be flooded with like a billion.
I mean, that's giving people a lot of free reign to say all kinds of crazy stuff, right?
Yeah, and it could be about a million different trash songs that are saying the most disgusting things, and be like, well, yeah, you gave permission. I think
maybe then she can deny wrongdoing. What if she actually says something crazy? She can say that it wasn't really me; it was one of the AI recordings.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, we're talking about just music and scams, but this is going to be an issue with politicians.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Um,
And it's going to disenfranchise people even more, probably, right? They're not going to believe anything.
right.
Or
So,
criticism on the way.
so yeah, I mean, it's going to be a problem here.
I think there needs to be some kind of regulation there.
Definitely. And even the people that are putting out the AI stuff, like OpenAI will put out ChatGPT, and people in the field, they're saying, look, we need to basically put a freeze on some things right now, because the technology is such that it's advancing much faster than society's going to be able to keep up. And we need to get a handle on this before the cat is completely out of the bag and we're screwed. And so
I mean, I don't know about freezing the entire technology, right? But I think some checks are needed. And I would even say criminal code, right? Like there should be actual crimes written into the law that, you know, this is a felony, you know, manipulating someone's, making someone sound like they said something that they didn't in a way that harms them in some way. Like that should actually be its own crime, I think.
Absolutely. And in that regard, last month, Italy banned ChatGPT until they could get a handle on it. Now this past week, they just unbanned it, but it's like, look, we need to be able to put something in place. And so they took that time to do it. But,
well, in that spirit, Jay, what is the bottom line?
the bottom line is the future is here. We have a fundamental shift, and we need to prepare for that. We need to understand that things are only going to get more difficult to discern right from wrong, or the truth from the fake. And so we have to be a little bit more diligent in what we believe, and do our own research, look for multiple sources. Don't try to just feed into whatever the hysteria is, because you're going to be fooled 9 times out of 10 with this new technology. And right now, it is the worst it's ever going to be, which means it's only going to get much better going from here. I think that's the bottom line on that.
That's discussion. The bottom line. Yeah, well said. And as always, people can find us on YouTube for the replays, right? We post up the full episodes as well as clips and the polls every week. We, of course, put the polls out on our stories on social media, and then we get it up on Reddit as well if you want to vote in those on Reddit and Instagram, right? Nuance Show at Instagram.
Yes. And YouTube.
Yeah, I mentioned the YouTube. All right, that's the same tag on YouTube. And of course, live on Facebook every Tuesday. So thank you to everyone for joining us, as always. We appreciate it.
Have a good night.
Yes, as always, we've got work to do. We'll catch you next time.